Welcome back, everybody, to another fantastic episode of the Pokemon Adventures podcast, a short podcast off of the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast. I am your host, Professor Chris G, and today we are going over Chapter 8 of this manga series, everybody. We are really getting up there. So, as you know, I'd like to recap what happened in the previous episode, and boy, did a lot happen in this last episode. I will try to sum it up the best way that I can. But Red and Misty finally got up to Mount Moon. They found out that Team Rocket is surrounding Mount Moon, and they are looking for the Moonstone that enhances a Pokemon's ability. So they are walking in, they end up sneaking inside, but end up running into a Team Rocket member and then Red challenged them to a Pokemon battle. And they were fighting a Rhyhorn. They beat Rhyhorn, and the Team Rocket member ended up injecting Rhyhorn with something and made it forcefully evolve into Rhydon. They battled Rhydon inside of the cave, and Pikachu ended up winning this battle and ended up making the cave kind of collapse on itself from the inside. But Red and Misty were able to make it out of the cave. And then at the end, Red reveals that he has the Moonstone. So he was able to get the Moonstone. Misty is elated, and we ended last week's episode by finding out that our heroes have made it to Cerulean City, the city of water. And Red was like, this is a joke, right? As he's looking out at the water and seeing that this whole city is just surrounded by water. But this is where we are going to start Chapter 8, and Chapter 8 is titled Suddenly Starmie. And we start by looking at Red and Misty, and Red is like, I mean, this place, there's no way this is your house. And Misty's like, afraid so. And we see that Misty lives in a mansion. So Misty is rich. She is super rich in this manga series. And then in the next panel, it looks like Misty has maids, and they're like, welcome home, Lady Misty. And one of them is like, your ladyship is dirty. And then Misty's like, I'd like you to meet somebody. And Red's like, my name's Red. Yo. We go to the next scene, and we see that Red and Misty have their clothes on a hanger outside. It looks like the maids kind of cleaned it, and they're air drying now. Misty has her own Pokemon Center on the inside, so she has a maid that's healing all of the Pokemon that had just escaped Mount Moon. And the next frame, Red is in a robe, because obviously he doesn't have any other clothes. The maids have prepared a very big table with candles, and he's like, man, I could get used to this. And then Misty walks into the room, and she's like, sorry to keep you waiting. And Misty is in a very, very elegant dress, and she is like dressed like a queen. We still don't know too much about her, but she looks like a princess. And Red is like, whoa, you didn't tell me this was a costume party. And Misty's like, oh, shut up. Just eat your dinner. So Red, and so they sit next to each other. All the maids are sitting at the table as well. It's one big dinner. And then we see that Red is telling the story of what happened with Team Rocket to everyone. And Red's like, and then Misty got knocked out. So it was me against all of Team Rocket. And Misty is getting just a little bit frustrated. And he's like, of course, it only took me a few minutes to mop them up. And Misty's getting even more irritated. And Misty's like, hey, Red, there's something I got to talk to you about. And Red's like, what is it, Misty? Can't stand listening to how I saved the day while you were snoozing. And then we go to another panel and we see that the Pokemon look like that they are all healed. She's like, shut up. Listen, our Pokemon will be fully healed soon. When they are, I think we need to put them on a serious training regimen. And Red's like, training? And she's like, yep, those dopes we fought at Mount Moon can't be the best Team Rocket's got. She's like, we're going to have more opponents to face, better ones, stronger ones. And Red's like, oh, chill out. And she's like, what? And Red's like, goons like that might scare you, but I know how to handle them. She's like, do you want to get your stupid self hurt? And Red is thinking back to when Misty was knocked out. And he's like, you wouldn't say that if you hadn't slept through my performance. And she's like, you idiot. And Red's like, sheesh, you don't have to take it personally. And Misty just storms out of the room. And Red's like, did I say something wrong? And we go to another frame, and Red is inside of a bedroom just looking at his Pokemon. He's like, nah. Anyway, who's got time for training? There's a whole mansion full of cute maids for me to ask out. So Red is smitten by all the maids that are here inside of this mansion as he's talking to Bulbasaur, Poliwhirl, and Pikachu. And we hear, psh, and then it looks like the bed gets kicked up out of nowhere, and it's like a big whirlwind. And he's like, hey, what's with this wind? Somebody help me. And Bulbasaur pops out of its Pokeball and uses its Vine Whip to grab Red while Red is all up in the air. And Bulbasaur drags Red down as there's a big gust of wind just swooshing around in the room, so everything is flying everywhere. And then all of a sudden it just stops. And the bed's upside down, everything's in chaos in the room, and Red and Bulbasaur are kind of hugging each other, and Red's like, oh man, it's over. Wait, what's this? And he looks on the ground and it looks like a shell. He's like, a scale? A Gyarados scale? And then it's now morning time. And Red is sitting at the breakfast table. And Red's like, is somebody after me? And then one of the maids comes over. Mr. Red? Please excuse us, but... And Red's like, huh? And he's like, oh, I get it. You want to see me in action. And then the maid's like, oh, yes, sir. And Red's like, well, if you insist, I can give you a little sample this very day. And then the maids are like, oh, but how? And then Red is like, Cerulean City must have a gym leader, right? Just for you, I'm going to challenge him and kick his butt. And then all the maids like, Red gets so mad. And he's like, what are you laughing about? You don't think I can? And then the maids are like, no, sir. It's just that we hear Misty in the background. So you want to fight the Cerulean City gym leader, do you? Then come with me. I'll take you there myself. And then they walk out of the mansion, and Red's like, "Hey, wait up! How far is this gym?" Because it seems like they've been walking for a while, and Misty's like, "At the edge of the city," and Red's like, "Not very convenient." And Misty's like, "Voila!" And she goes and she opens the door, and she's like, "Please, after you." And she just starts to laugh. She's like, and Red's like, "What is going on here?" And then they're walking through the building, and he's like, "Don't tell me the idiot isn't here." And he's like, "We've checked all the rooms. Where is this moron gym leader anyway?" And then Misty's like, "The moron is right here." And she points at herself, and Red points at her. He's like, "Oh, okay, I get it. Funny. Now, where is he really?" And then she brings out her Starmie and just splashes Red straight in the face. He's like, "What the?" And she starts storming up towards Red, and he's like, "Now hold on a second, let's." And Misty points right at him, and she's like, "Starmie, whack him!" And Starmie sends out another water gun and just chases Red around the room that they're in. And Misty's like, "Not in a fighting mood? What if I told you the one who attacked you last night was me?" And Red is on the ground. He's like, "No way." And then she's like, he's like, "Well, if you say so, you'll regret that. Bulbasaur, go!" And sends Bulbasaur out of its Pokeball. And Red is like, "Vine Whip." And Misty's like, "A Vine Whip? You've got to be kidding. Bubble Beam!" And Starmie sends Bubble Beam out, and Bubble Beam ends up turning into a big whirlpool inside of the room that they're in, and sends Bulbasaur and Red flying. And that Bubble Beam was a one-hit combo for Bulbasaur, because Bulbasaur is now knocked out. And Red's like, "What's gotten into you anyway?" And Misty, it seems like she's just agitated. And Red's like, "Huh?" And he's like, "I thought you knew how I felt." Misty goes, "About us as a team. I just knocked you down, but Starmie wasn't enough at Mount Moon." Misty's like, "Don't you get it? We have to get real or they'll flatten us. We have to be at our best, and we have to work together." And Red's like, "She did all this just to prove a point?" And Red's like, "You're right. I don't have time to impress girls. And you don't have time for tears." She's sitting on the ground, wiping her eyes because she's kind of tearing up a little bit, because she feels so right that they need to train in order to fight Team Rocket. And Misty cheers up. And Red's like, "Let's go train." And then we jump to a few days later, and then we see Red. It looks like he's getting ready to leave from Misty's, and he's like, "Are you certain it's wise to let him go?" One of the maids goes, and she's like, "Yup, we've learned each other's skills and attacks. Now it's time to hone those skills on our own. But I do look forward to meeting Red again." And Red's like, "See ya, Misty." And he kind of waves over to her, and he's back out onto his adventure. And as Red is walking away and he's saying, "See ya, Misty," we get a nice little flash that he has won the Cascade badge from Misty as well. So he has battled Misty in an official Pokemon gym battle and won, everybody. So he does have 2 badges at this point. So that was the end of that. But we go into the next frame right before we're getting into chapter 9. And it says, not far from Cerulean City. And we get, this is Bill from the original red, blue, and green version. And Bill is like, dang it, the thing's gone kablooey again. He has a southern accent. I'm not sure if I'm going to do it any justice, but I'm going to try. He said, this here Pokemon transporter don't run no better a Metapod on molasses. He's like, fixing it's just one big old pain in the... And then the door closes right behind him. So he was inside of a machine, everybody. And the machine door closes. And then there's an auto timer button that is already set. And there's a Rattata in one of the chambers. And there's Bill in the other chamber. And the machine starts going off. It's like, bam, bam, bam. And that is how we end chapter 8. So it looks like we're about to get introduced to Bill, who, if you remember in the original Pokemon games, turned himself into a Pokemon, which looks like is what's happening here. So it's just funny. I remember this, and I'm gonna have a hard time going over Bill's little slang. Like on here, he's like, "Dang it, the thing's gone kablooey again," or his this here Pokemon transporter don't run no better than a Metapod on molasses. Fixing it just one of the big old pain in the... I mean, if you're reading this, I mean, I'm on page 117, but it's just... that southern accent is really going to get to me in starting in chapter 9. But other than that, that's next week. It's time to get some of the plugs going here. Well, right before that, Red has not caught a new Pokemon in some chapters now. So he's still walking through with the Pokemon that he has. So he needs some new Pokemon, and he needs these new Pokemon quick. But I guess he will be getting some new Pokemon in the coming chapters, if I remember correctly. So we'll have to find out who those are. But time for plugs. Follow us at PokeBreakdown on Twitter. That is where I will be tweeting out everything for this show, along with the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast. Also, follow us on Instagram at PokeBreakdown. I will be going through things for this manga series. I can't wait to start going over some of these with you guys. Maybe send over some fan art that I can put onto the good old Instagram machine. Become a Patreon for this show, and you'll be able to finish this volume 1 that I have done so far in the Pokemon community that we're in. So volume 1 should, by the time that you are listening to this, be completely out on Patreon. So go ahead and take a listen on there. That is it, everybody. Yeah, like I said, follow us at PokeBreakdown on both Twitter and Instagram for everything. And we will see you next week for another episode. And chapter 9 is going to be called But Pharaoh Itself is the name of the next episode. So I'm real interested to find out what's going to happen next. And I'm sure you are too. So I will see you next week, and have a good night.